Welcome back to the channel. What I'm working on today is building a sign for my friend to put out in front of his new practice. So I'm making the main frame out of this 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch steel tubing that I had laying around. And I wanted to make it out of metal just because it'll turn out pretty smooth after I paint it. So all I'm going to do is weld this cross member in here, and then on the opposite side there'll be another little cross member that comes out. I'm going to put a little detail here on the end where I'm going to cut the four corners and kind of squish them in together after I bend everything in and tack it in place. Since this isn't structural at all, since it's only aesthetic, I'm going to use Bondo to fill in the holes, sand it down, and paint it. And then that detail will also be on the top and on this other side. And going from the top over to this cross member, there'll be like a little metal design here. The sign is going to be 24 inches wide. And I'm going to come out at about 32 inches. And at 32 inches, that should allow the sign to be centered and for me to complete my little detail here and have about 3 inches, maybe a little bit less on either side. I'm going to cut a 6-inch piece, and this piece will go opposite of the horizontal piece on the other side, and this will give me enough length to make my detail and to weld it in place. I bought this saw on Amazon for a couple $100. It's been working pretty well for me so far. So this detail is just going to have, it's going to look like it was just kind of raised in the middle, like the metal was just going to kind of come up to a peak. And how you would make this if you were going to make it out of wood is you just sit here and just cut 45s off on this, and it would just kind of leave the little raised area in the middle, and that's what I'm going to make out of this. So I'm going to measure, this is 2.5 inch, so I'm going to measure back about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to make just a really light line to where I can neatly bend the metal to the center, and then I'm going to cut little triangles out on each side, and then that'll allow me to push all these pieces to the middle and tack weld them in the middle, and then I'll be able to Bondo it, clean it up, and it'll look like it's been mitered. It's not perfect, but I don't need it to be perfect. Considering I'm going to use the Bondo, I'm just going to tack weld it here at the top. And I just have to do this 2 more times. One at the opposite end of the horizontal piece that connects to the post, and then the top of the post. Okay, so I went ahead and got the detail done on the other ends here. And you see all these scrape marks? This is where I ground off the galvanizing. You don't want to weld through galvanizing. Galvanizing is zinc. And once you get that airborne, it becomes pretty toxic, so you want to make sure that you get all that cleaned off. And on the ends here, as I said before, they don't have to be pretty. Just enough to where I can weld them to keep them in place. Not that they're going to move, but I'm just going to tack them together and then Bondo up the ends. So I'm going to start welding these on. What I'm going to do is put a tack weld in one corner, get it exactly where I want it, then I'll tack another corner and just keep squaring it up as I make tack welds. Make sure it's going to stay where I want it, and then I'll go ahead and weld it around. Do the same thing even for this little piece. Okay, I have it welded up the way I want it. I'm gonna go ahead and grind it flat and get ready to put some Bondo on the ends. It's day 2 of the sign build. I've gotten all the metal cleaned up and kind of ground some of these welds down because I wanted to have some nice edges in here. I don't really want to see the welds. And the reason I can do this, one, this isn't going to hold a lot of weight. And two, if you've welded this metal together properly, the base metals are welded together. And so the little bit of a rise in the weld can be ground down. I'm going to be using Bondo to fill in all these gaps, as I said before. And I went ahead and cleaned up the metal really well. And since this is galvanized metal, I'm going to be using this Bondo because this is specific for different types of metal, including the galvanized metal. Whenever you use any product like this, make sure you definitely read the label and make sure that it's going to hold up for whatever project you're going to use it for. So as some of you can tell, I mixed up way too much of this stuff. I was able to use a lot of it, but not all of it. It's hard to dry up here. I'm a little out of practice using this stuff. So I'm just gonna knock down these high spots, mix up another batch and recoat it. And I kind of want it to get to a place to where I can form it with sandpaper. If you've been following the channel, you'll remember that I said these 2x10x16s were about $47, and the price had gone up to, I think it was somewhere close to 60. And so we didn't know when we were going to put the ceiling in. So I was walking around Lowe's the other day, and I don't know why, but I happened to see that they were on sale for $19 and almost $20 a piece. So I went ahead and bought the rest of them. So this will be coming up in an upcoming video. I'll get this ceiling done. But in the meantime, these boards are going to serve as a workbench. I'm going to use the plasma cutter. I'm going to cut about an inch strip all the way down. So the piece of metal is just going to go from about here. I'm going to put a couple curls in it. It's going to come down and it'll have a couple more curls. And then I'm just going to tack weld it in place. I have been looking for a reason to use this plasma cutter since I got my 50 amp outlets hooked up. So this will be a good test. So far I've only been able to use it on 110, so hopefully the 50 amp works pretty well. The 110, it can cut for a little while and then it just kicks out, so hopefully this is going to work really well. Oh yeah, it works a lot better on 50 amps. Actually cuts pretty well now. I'm just gonna sand this down flat, try to get a bunch of the bumps and stuff off, then I'm gonna coat it again and see where I'm at. Okay, I'm gonna let this set up for the night. I've got everything pretty well filled in. It looks really bad right now, but I'm gonna sand it pretty aggressively tomorrow, and then I'll fill in any little imperfections, but I think it's built up enough. Hopefully it's the last day of the sign build. I'm gonna go ahead and sand the rest of this Bondo down really smooth with 80 grit sandpaper. And I don't want these edges to be really sharp. If you notice the metal, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a little bit rounded. So I don't really want these to be super sharp edges anyway. After I'm done sanding, I'm gonna weld my 2 hooks in here to hold the sign. And I'm gonna make my little decoration to get it welded in here. Whenever I'm sanding or doing anything really dirty or obviously painting or anything, I use one of these full face masks. They have these paper filters in here that'll filter out any of the airborne debris. And so they have the carbon filters behind them, but these will trap any of the dust and garbage. And these are pretty inexpensive to replace. So I definitely like using this better than having the nose and mouth respirator and the glasses, because the glasses always seem to get fogged up. Here you don't have that issue. So I'm just going to use some of this 150 sandpaper to not finish sanding it, but just to kind of get some of the areas that might need a little bit more Bondo. The one thing I've learned working with Bondo or a drywall or anything, whatever it looks like before it gets painted is pretty much what it's going to look like after. So definitely make sure you get it to look the way you want it to look before you put primer and paint on it. With a little bit higher grit, if I can't fill in all those gaps or get all those imperfections out, I'm definitely going to keep putting a little bit more Bondo on. While I'm waiting for the Bondo to dry, I'm going to go ahead and sand down this decorative piece. Whenever you cut with a plasma cutter, there's always a slag left. I want to get that off and just kind of get a nice finished edge. I'm going to sand all this off, hopefully for the last time, and we'll see if it's ready for priming. So to bend this, I just cut a little groove in this pipe, and then I'm going to put the end of this in here and just bend it around the pipe. What I didn't realize is that I should have cut a notch maybe here in the middle, because I realized that this end started bending out. That's why I have the clamp on there. Maybe next time I'll cut that, or if this doesn't work, I'll be out cutting a groove in the middle here. So the reason I have to put these marks on here is because I have to grind this galvanizing off before I can weld this on. And when I weld this on, I'm going to weld along here. I don't want to weld in here because I don't want to wreck the way this looks. I mean, it's not beautiful, but I don't want to, wreck the curve. So I just have a couple of these little lag hooks that I'm going to put in here. I've already cut the end off right here, so the sign can just slide over it and it'll just hang there. So I'm going to run a tap into these holes so I can thread them, and then these hooks can just thread right in there. I will get them about where I need them to be, and then I'll just weld them in place. And here's the finished product. I got the sign from my neighbor. He works for a sign company and he made the sign. I told him we're just kind of doing this as a favor for our friend. They started a new business and we're just kind of putting this up to surprise them. So he made it for free, so that helped out. But when I priced that sign at other places, it was about $120. So some of these signs get pretty expensive. So that's another project done. I didn't film the painting because I thought it would be pretty boring, so you're welcome for that. And just so you know, this doesn't have to be just to hold a sign. I mean, it could be to hold the numbers of your house number or something out at the end of your driveway. Or, you could do different things with it instead of the decoration, kind of make like a shepherd's hook to hang a flower basket or something. Or you could use it to hold up your mailbox. You could just put the decoration or angle or something underneath the horizontal portion, put your mailbox on top. So there's a lot of different variations that you can do. with this type of project. The next project I'm going to be working on is the ceiling joists. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I was able to get all the ceiling joists for an extremely reasonable price, I think, $20 a piece. So I'm going to start getting those installed and finish up the electrical, and then after that it's going to be insulation and drywall. Hopefully I get all that done before winter and have a lot more comfortable shop. We appreciate you watching our videos, and we greatly appreciate those of you who have subscribed, and we hope to see you in the next video. Thanks.